But it's not about love. It's a comedy, but not everyone's laughing. It's a place where the one thing you can't expect is the unexpected.
Llévenme al aeropuerto.
No puedo, he quedado.
He dicho que me lleve.
Women on the verge of a nervous breakdown. A story about women who love men.
Todos estos años te he esperado.
Dime que te hubieras muerto si no vuelvo.
Estaría muerta si no hubieras vuelto.
Women who love to get even. And men who try to get away.
¿Iván?
¿Quién esperabas que llamara? ¿Iván?
¿Me ha llamado otra vez Iván? No. Ay, olvídalo ya, chica.
¿Quiere decirme quién es ese Iván?
Eres un débil, Iván. ¿Iván? ¿Dónde está Iván?
From internationally acclaimed filmmaker Pedro Almodóvar comes a deliriously deranged comedy that follows no rules, spares no victims, takes no prisoners.
Pero no me negará que aquí ha ocurrido algo raro.
Women on the verge of a nervous breakdown.
Well,
Welcome back.
welcome back to the show, everyone.
Pete, this is a
Yes.
very important episode.
I mean, I think that trailer says it all.
Yes.
We can pretty
I'm
much
very
stop
excited
right
to talk
now.
about this movie.
As my listeners, my name's Pete.
And I'm Scott, and these are the movies that made us gay.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, Pete.
Ah.
It has been over 200 episodes, and
Yeah.
I'm ashamed to say we have not done a Pedro Almodóvar movie.
You know,
But it is
you're
time.
right. Yeah. We're here. We made it.
I put something on our stories a few weeks ago or months ago. I can't even remember. It was the summer.
It's been a minute.
Of what Pedro Almodóvar movie do you want us to talk about?
Right.
And it was pretty much like overwhelming Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown.
Oh.
So that is the movie that we were talking about today with our friend Jose.
Jose Gallegos.
Gallegos, welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show.
Hi. Hello,
Hi.
everybody.
Thanks for coming out. Thanks for being our guest today. You picked a good one.
Well, I didn't pick it, apparently.
Well,
It was
you got
media.
you got
It was
wrangled into a good
interesting
one.
when I put in our stories of what Pedro Almodóvar movie, and I think that's a part of the thing about Pedro's movies that I think it's a little overwhelming of, well, what are you going to start with?
Sure.
Just because, like, he's made so many movies. And I have not seen a lot of the movies, too. So there are still, like, big holes in his filmography that I have not even got to. This movie being one of them, I just watched this movie for the podcast.
Wow.
So...
Same.
And it was interesting that I kind of thought it would be mixed, but it was pretty overwhelming that people really...
Oh, the response?
The
Sure.
response was this movie. There was some other ones kind of mixed in. I saw All About My Mother, Laws of Desire. I'm sure that there probably was another Penelope movie, too. But yeah.
At least one. Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of like your, not quintessential, but I mean, it's just the one that you think of. It's that thing that when someone tells you, think of an Almodóvar movie in your head. I just go to this. I just go to this one. I go to this poster. I just think of it, even though.
And you hadn't even seen the movie.
I hadn't even seen
You'd only just seen images of it.
Right.
Just because when you take a film class, chances are in one of your textbooks, you're going to see an image of one of these movies.
Well, with this one specifically, because it was his breakout movie,
Right,
and
yeah.
it was the one that put him on the map, because he had done a handful of movies before this.
Yeah.
But this was the one that really hit with audiences, and I think at the time it was the highest grossing film from Spain in the U.S., which
Yeah.
had just beat out Carlos Saura's Carmen, which if you have not seen
Oh, wow.
that movie is amazing, and it kind of blew me away when I saw it a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and I mean, when it came out, it was just kind of a phenomenon in Spain, right? Like it just like
Yeah.
swept the Goyas, just like kind of blew up. For the
Debuted
entire
at the
country.
1988 Venice International Film Festival and then went on to have its United States release in November of that year.
All right.
And I mean, when you watch this movie, it's just, if you would have been an American audience, let alone Spain, because I think that Pedro was pretty familiar with moviegoers at that time in Spain, but definitely something very new for America. But there are scenes of this movie that would have blown audiences here away. Of that, I don't think that I can ever think of a movie prior to this of shooting an answering machine, but actually filming it inside the answering machine. You did not get shots like that in America at all.
Right.
And he's done shots like that before, like in Law of Desire, you see the underhand from inside the typewriter. So
sure.
Yeah.
He has a different filmic style. I think that with Women on the Verge, this was kind of a convergence of like his zany madcap origins, but in a more refined manner, because it has that frenetic energy where it just like keeps clipping along, but there doesn't really seem to be anything superfluous going on. It just kind of each of the 500 plot lines that are going through just kind of seamlessly transition into one another.
Right.
And I was reading that he started out with the script of a remake of Cocteau's The Human Voice, and then just as he was writing it, it just sort of morphed into this screwball comedy. Because I think the thing is with that story is that it's just set in an apartment.
Yes.
And it's only like, it's a 30 minutes max story. And then he decided to get her out of the apartment, and then just kind of all of the elements of the script kind of formed once he got her out of the apartment.
Yeah, so Almodóvar has multiple obsessions, and oftentimes he'll fixate on that, and you'll see it bounce from film to film. So, like, with The Human Voice, you see that pop up in, in Law of Desire, where one of the characters is doing a play version of it with his transgender sister. And then it pops up in here just in terms of the plot line, and then also he did a version with Tilda Swinton, but other kind of obsessions that he has. Apparently I believe he saw an article about a brain-dead patient, and he became so obsessed with that article that he started integrating it into his movies. So, like, if you watch Flower of My Secret, it begins with kind of a demonstration of doctors telling a woman that her husband is brain dead. And then All About My Mother, it's with a woman whose son becomes brain dead. And then Talk to Her, you're just kind of fully integrated in there, where there are two characters that are actually brain dead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Threads. I'm not going to pull at any of them. I'm going to let you two talk this out.
Intricate tapestry.
What I have noticed is, are your earrings that you're wearing a tribute to Candela?
They are.
I noticed that today. I noticed that today when I was watching some of the new. I just got the new Criterion, and I just noticed on a close-up that her earrings are little coffee pots.
I was like, what is that? What are they that she's wearing? I couldn't figure it out. And Scott goes, they're coffee pots. I was like, oh, God.
So as a little budding gay boy who had IFC and Sundance Channel, when I was first watching this, I became obsessed with her earrings.
Sure.
I could never find a version of it because
Where-
eBay was just in its infancy, and I don't think any thrift shops were going to have it. But more recently, they released like a limited edition version of the earrings that were made in honor of Pedro Almodóvar.
Oh, wow.
So
Cute.
I do have my Candela earrings.
I mean, I feel like, okay, it's 1988. Granted, this is Spain. It is a whole another continent. But I'm just here to tell you that, like, these fashions in this movie in particular,
Insane.
so good. Like
polka dot dress.
Candela,
Yeah.
in particular, though, she's wearing like these creepers with like the knee highs. Like, oh my god, she's looking
beautiful.
great.
It's just candy color.
Yeah, there's
Everybody's just dressed to the nines, and like I don't know that Spain and particular Madrid was like that necessarily at the time.
Right.
But in an Almodóvar film, they're
It's
definitely always going to be like that.
And like Beppa is very kind of monochromatic. Like if it's not just red and white, well, that's not monochromatic, but that's what dichromatic. Or she's very simple color blocked, right?
Yeah.
Red and white, or I feel like did she wear blue at one point?
Yeah, she
She
wore
wore
a blue blazer.
but it's still very like a statement kind of color situation, and I mean Marisa, I love.
Oh my God, Rossy de Palma.
I just cannot not look at her and just be like, oh my God,
That
she's
face
everything.
is so fascinating.
It's a Picasso face.
Yeah.
That's the way that it's been
I mean,
described.
Pete and I always have a fascination with handsome women. We cover a lot of movies just with very handsome female actresses, and I feel like Rossy de Palma is just like the queen of the handsome woman.
If you watch Kika, which is kind of not a great film and has not aged that well, it's kind of problematic, but she has a role in it where she plays a lesbian, and at one point Kika is trying to tell her, like, oh, you can be beautiful, and Rossy de Palma is looking in the mirror and she's like, no, I want an ugly face. I want to be like one of those wardens in a women's prison film. And then she just like makes a scary, and it's like, yeah, that's not like, she's got a fashion face, she's got an editorial face,
absolutely.
and there's no reason to change it or no reason to try and do anything to it because it's just perfect the way that it is. It's so angular.
It's so angular.
That nose is pretty incredible.
Her nose is insane, but it's just like you can't do anything to it because her face is so particular. Her face is so long. What are you gonna like make her nose smaller than she would look?
Like she has to have that long nose.
Yeah. but like aside from how she looks, she's so good in all of his movies.
Yeah.
She's funny when she needs to be. She's like a bitch in this movie, but she's still funny. Like
a bitch, and she has a very moving moment at the end.
She does
too.
Yes,
and she's asleep for most of the movie.
Yep.
And still makes an impact.
Yes. That's that goddamn spiked gazpacho. I'm sorry. I mean. Say what you will about gazpacho, but it just does not sound like something.
Okay,
that I'm like,
so
no, it's a hot summer day. Just give me that tomato soup.
Okay,
that ice cold.
Tomato.
So I'm just thinking of Bloody Mary. Is that what
gazpacho
is in Spain?
No,
or is
no.
it's like a soup?
Yeah, it's
yeah.
like a soup.
She says she listed off all the ingredients. It's literally like what she did. She put it all in the blender, and it's like what was she said? Onions, garlic, green peppers. A lot of tomatoes. That's about it.
I mean, maybe if you add some vodka and put in like a celery stick.
You know what it is? It's like if you get like pico de gallo and then just put it in the blender.
Okay. Sure.
And then drink it. And then throw in some sleeping pills. And you're good.
Before we get too into talking about women on the Verge, what are our backgrounds with Pedro? And I'm not just talking about our Pedro here.
Me. Mm-hmm. Gosh. Well, why don't you take it, Jose?
You go first, Jose.
So I came to Pedro in high school, again, because of IFC and Sundance Channel, where the first movie I saw was All About My Mother. Mm-hmm. And around the time that I was going into college, Sony Pictures Classics had a retrospective of some of his films, so I managed to get the box set of that and was just
Sony Pictures Classic, like A24 could never. Like they were like the OGs.
In their heyday, they were the kings of foreign films. And with him in particular, like they had such a buddy-buddy relationship. And it was just amazing to see kind of come to fruition. And yeah, so once I got to college, then I took a course with this professor named Marcia Kinder, who's one of the best writers on Spanish cinema. And the course was on Luis Buñuel and Pedro Almodóvar, and kind of talking about Spanish cinema through the lens of auteur theory, and just showing the dichotomy between a director that's in the diaspora and a director that's specifically localized to Spain. Sure. Like, you can't really say Spanish cinema without saying Pedro Almodóvar, because you kind of put a face to that. But up until that point, I mean, Spain was such a hermetically sealed country because of Franco that, like, a lot of those filmmakers didn't really get well known until later in life. Because, like, if you start listing off all the Spanish filmmakers, it's hard to say, like, one that defines it. But, like, for me, having discovered it through these classes, like, it's such an interesting tapestry. And, like, that's probably for another podcast discussion.
Sure.
But for Pedro Almodóvar, when he's coming out of this vision of a hermetically sealed Spain, and then right when Franco's dying is around the time that he's starting to make movies, and you're getting La Movida, where you're getting this influx of porno, of horror movies, of everything, all this culture just flooding into Spain. that's where he starts to like go crazy and make his movies, and then slowly he just starts refining it, and it's just so beautiful to watch.
And Franco died in 78?
I think 70, somewhere towards the late 70s.
Yeah. I don't remember from Saturday Night Live, but I remember from my sister and I watched a lot of the first 3 seasons of Saturday Night Live. They would rerun on local access TV out here, KDOC, channel 56, and and I remember that it was a running bit on Weekend Update. They would do a bit on Weekend Update, do a joke, and then it would cut to.
I think it was Chevy Chase that was saying it.
No, it was. I think it was Garrett Morris. It was Garrett Morris, and he would say, I think they all would say it, but I remember. Oh, I know why Garrett Morris said it, because he did the for the hearing impaired, but he didn't do sign language. He just screamed it.
Yeah,
and he would repeat Chevy saying Generalissimo Francisco Franco is still dead. I don't know why that was funny. I love it, but it was the late 70s. That's so interesting that, I mean, obviously his filmography goes back that far, but I mean, for myself, I feel like I was aware of him as a filmmaker, but didn't really see anything until Talk to Her.
Well, I was going to say, also, which kind of like home video in the 90s, though. I would say nothing really became readily available until probably after All About My Mother.
Right. Yeah, and then my mom and my grandmother saw Volver and loved it.
Yeah. And regarding the home video market, I think that a lot of the issues were because a lot of his films had different distributors.
Yeah.
So it was between, like, I think Women on the Verge was Orion, and
so
then
interesting, yeah.
It was October Films and Miramax.
And October Films, I know, later would become Focus.
Yeah.
If you like look at the how businesses change, it would kind of evolve into Focus Features.
Yeah, so it was a lot of people had different hands in his filmography, and it wasn't until Sony Pictures Classics started regularly distributing that they became more readily available, and then they started getting access to his other films since some of those companies went defunct, so now they have the majority of the collection.
I was watching clips of the 2000 Academy Awards, and I do remember when Penelope Cruz and Antonio Banderas presented him for the Oscar for All About My Mother.
And the Oscar goes to Pedro!
All About My Mother!
This is Spain's 18th nomination, and the second for director Pedro Almodóvar, who was nominated in 1988 for his film Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown.
And at that time, like, Penelope Cruz would have been red hot in the United States. Like, that's an early television appearance from Penelope at that time.
Yeah.
And yeah, her saying, like, Pedro, when he ends up winning. So I remember All About My Mother when it came out, when it won, but not a movie that I probably didn't watch until college. But I remember Talk to Her being a huge deal when it came out. And I think that was probably the first of his movies that I ever watched. I think that I watched Talk to Her in high school. Of course, blown away by that movie, because that movie is so fucking delightful and bizarre that my 17-year-old brain had never seen anything quite like it. I have a memory of watching that movie with my parents, and that movie, I mean, they like climb in like a vagina in that movie. Also, I remember when Bad Education came out, and that was also a huge deal because it was rated NC-17.
Yep.
And I mean, that was just kind of, I remember reading about it in Rolling Stone, like reading Peter Trevor's review on it. And I think tracking that movie down too in college, that was a big deal. And yeah, I feel like throughout the years, I've kind of have been constantly playing catch up with a lot of his filmography. I remember during the pandemic, we watched Laws of Desire, the movie that he made prior to this movie, also with Carmen. And Volver was a huge deal because it got Penelope that Oscar nomination.
Yeah, and Talk to Her was a huge deal, not only because of critical reception, but also because of the controversy, which at the time people had expected that Spain was going to submit it for foreign language film,
and it
but
didn't end up getting It didn't end up getting this.
No,
getting
it
selected,
was
yeah.
Mondays in the Sun that got submitted. And so some people read that there was a response to that, and that's likely why he got.
We're going to vote for it because it
for
didn't make it in foreign?
For director and for original screenplay. I don't know the veracity of that. I just know that there was controversy at the time, but he ended up winning original screenplay, which is quite a feat for a Spanish film.
We were watching clips of it, and Ben Affleck's pronunciation of the entire category was kind of spot on.
And here are the nominees for original screenplay. Todd Haynes for Far From Heaven. Jay Cox, Steve Zalian, and Kenneth Lonergan for Gangs of New York. Nia Vardalos for My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Pedro Almodóvar for Talk to Her. Carlos Cuarón and Alfonso Cuarón for Y Tu Mamá También. And the Oscar goes to Pedro Almodóvar.
He has an amazing Mexican accent.
His grasp of Mexican Spanish is kind of amazing.
I forget what the meme was, but it was just like, wow, Ben Affleck talks like my Theo. And it's like, yeah, he does.
Yeah, he absolutely does.
He must have, I guess he was just paying attention in Spanish class.
No,
in
he lived,
Boston.
he
lived in
Mexico.
Mexico.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think his father did business down there, so they lived in there for a time.
That's interesting. Do you know the movie that won foreign feature over Women on the Verge?
Pele the Conqueror.
Are you familiar with it?
Yes.
Is it good?
It is good. And Max von Sydow was nominated for Best Actor that year for that performance. So, like, it's understandable why it won. I think that both films were relatively popular. So, it's not... I can't really say that it was robbed. I just think that within the test of time, I think Women on the Verge has had a longer cultural standing.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Okay. I read in I think it was IMDb that like the translation of the title is closer to Panic Attack.
Yeah, it's like Women on the Verge of Hysteria.
Of hysteria, right? Okay.
Yeah, because on a nervous breakdown, there's a different phrase for that. But this is more in line with, because of his love of film, obviously he's going to pay tribute to certain directors and a lot of directors that directed women. So
Hysteria,
kind of
yeah.
these hysterical women.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so watching this movie, and I've never been to Spain. I am Mexican American, but that means nothing. That is a totally different place.
From East LA.
You know what I mean? Well, I think that a lot of people out there, especially white people, may refer to Spanish-speaking people as Spanish.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's not the case. So culturally, I don't have a lot of frame of reference for Spain, right? But I'm watching this, and the main character, Pepa, right, and she's played by
Carmen Maura.
There are things where you say, okay, maybe there are some similarities in the culture, and like I'm talking about the title being closer to, Panic Attack, but also Hysteria and all that. She is going through it. Ultimately, at the end of the movie, we find out why she's going through it. But man, this lady is fucking going through it. To the point where I'm just like, she just really threw that lit match on her bed. Like she didn't even have a care in the world. But there's so many things going through my head as I'm watching it, because I'm like trying to relate to this character who is, just kind of having the worst 2 days of her life. But also I'm just like, look at this apartment. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, what is going on? She has chickens on her balcony.
That production design is just so beautiful. And like even to the fact that, again, going back to his love of certain directors, just the kind of artificiality of her balcony where you just see that skyline is clearly a screen that's just standing in for a skyline. But it's just the thing that I love about this film is, and the thing that I love about most of his films, is just the Spanish specificity. That so many markers of the plot are related to things that are specific to Spain, like the fact that she's a voiceover actor and is dubbing Johnny Guitar, the fact that gazpacho plays a large role in everything that's going on. Like, it's just so amazing to kind of watch it unfold, and yet have this kind of universality where, like, to equate it to today, because I don't think that the film would work if it were set today. It works perfectly in the 80s because of, like, phones, cell phones. They don't have any of those. And so with this, like, if it were to be made today, it would be like her trying to text and him just leaving her on red the entire time. And like, just the level of anxiety that you get where it's just like they're just casually missing each other. Like he's in a phone booth and she's just throwing out his stuff on the side, or like he calls her and she just barely wakes up and tries to answer. It's just all those misconnections that just kind of like you're like, okay, I know that the film can't end right now, but like, had you just answered the phone like 5 seconds earlier, we could have gotten all of this resolved.
Absolutely. And just the fact that the answering machine itself just like plays this part in this movie.
Almost like it's a character of the movie.
Yeah, and it's just that thing where nowadays we have to like invent a reason why your phone is broken, or you know what I mean? Why your
if you watch a horror movie,
or,
the character's phone has to die or something. Or like we went to Bottoms last night, and I noticed that everybody has a flip phone. That like this is a period movie because the director just didn't want these kids on their cell phone the entire time.
But I didn't think about that. I was watching it, but I mean, obviously that does make total sense. But it does seem like it just fits so perfectly in that it is this 80s movie, with I don't know, just the entire aesthetic. It's interesting when I did first start to kind of become aware of Almodóvar and his like visual style and his visual language and all of that. As a kid growing up, my introduction to foreign movies was like on PBS. I feel like they would show like movies on PBS, and they would show unrated and uncut and just, here you go, regular television. This is not cable. Kids, watch out. And to me, it would be like, okay, I know this is a foreign movie because maybe there's not a score or a traditional score like we're used to. They're not these, John Williams, Spielberg movies, right? They're different. And to me, they just visually look different because they just are. And there's just something about that Almodóvar visual language that he has with his just the color scheme and the artifice of the setting and all that. And I do think it's interesting that these characters they're actors, and I think they're in the universe of this movie. I think they're famous. Actors, right? They're not just voiceover artists.
Yeah, Peppa.
Because doesn't she kind of stop to like people kind of stop her?
Yeah, she's a TV actress. Yeah. She plays the mother of the Crossroads Killer, and so
that commercial is epic.
There you go.
Ecce Homo. No, Almodóvar had this thing about TV, and I don't know if it's a hate relationship, but he inserted it in a lot of his movies where he would have a TV commercial going on. And some of the ones that I clearly remember are like in All About My Mother, there's a commercial for Huggies. But in Pepe Lucci Boom, there's a commercial about these magic underwear that, like, if you fart, they turn into perfume. If you pee on them, they change a different color. And if you're having some lonely time, they can turn into a dildo. And he also had another one that I think it was a woman that was dressed as Scarlett O'Hara, and I think she had her face burned off. And she's just telling her story of her lover.
Oh my God.
And how he threw coffee at her, and she's like, I'd never forget that cup of coffee.
Oh my God. Yeah, so just the idea that the two of them are actors, so it kind of gives a reason for her apartment to be this penthouse.
And performers are a big. I mean, you see that in a lot of his movies too. Is actresses and performers and people that work in theater and movies too.
Yeah. At first, when we were watching it, I was like, "What movie are they looping?" And yeah, it's Johnny Guitar.
Yeah. Which, if you have not seen that movie is insane because Joan Crawford has no place in the Wild West.
Sure. Well, for that short that they just did with Pedro Pascal and Ethan Hawke, all of the art and the marketing is Johnny Guitar.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, he has his films that he references, and specifically with this one, what I appreciate about him in regards to his use of pastiche is that it's oftentimes not gratuitous. It's actually integral to the plot. So, like, when they're having that conversation, when, Ivan is dubbing his lines and then she's dubbing her lines, they mean something specifically to them. And it's like they're having that conversation themselves. And that's why she faints, and you get that great shot of, like, looking at her fainting through her glasses on the floor. Like, some of these shots are just amazing.
Yeah.
But with the dubbing itself, I mean, that's specific to Spain, and the reason why it's such an important thing to kind of look at, and this is me going back into like academic mode, but for Spanish audiences that were living under Franco, a lot of the import films that came in would have to get dubbed into Spanish, and oftentimes if the Ministry of Culture didn't really like the messages that were being purported, they'd have to change the dialogue and change the film entirely. So like a film like Magumbo, which stars Ava Gardner, Grace Kelly, and Clark Gable, they completely changed the plot line from like any insinuation of an adulterous affair to just like, no, these two characters are brother and sister. They're not sleeping with each other. That's funny.
Wow.
Yeah, so that has a cultural specificity, but also kind of a plot line specificity for them to like have these misconnections and show that meaningful dialogue that they can't have with one another.
Wow.
And you also get that great secretary that's there. Just like adds her own commentary. And at one point she's just like looks out and she's like, I'll get you that taxi. And she's like, wait a minute. Who wanted the taxi? And she just gets on the intercom and is like, whoever wanted a taxi, please come to the front desk.
So funny.
They hear.
Pedro said something kind of interesting on the Criterion interview, that this movie was in Spain Franco had not been around for a good 10 years, and just kind of the movie he mentioned is just kind of this love letter and celebration of how far a country like Spain had come, and that time of that there's bright colors in this movie. The city, everything runs on time. There's a taxi as soon as you walk out the door. If you walk into a pharmacy and you don't have your prescription in hand, they can just give it to you. Just kind of celebrating how far
I can come back. Okay.
Just kind of celebrating how far this country had come in like a decade since Franco, which I think is kind of interesting.
Can we talk about the disco cab driver?
Oh, I love the cab driver.
It's not disco. What is?
He was
Samba.
No, it was Mambo, and then he started listing off the other things that he could play. He was like salsa, techno pop.
Yeah.
He had everything available for you. And when
that's
he did it,
wild though.
His
that's
his magazine selection, the production design of that cab is pretty cool.
But he had like gum,
and he got her eye drops
Kleenex.
later.
Yeah, he had eye drops in there. He had but shit that kind of like Uber drivers have now, or I don't know if they're still doing that anymore. But like, kind of unheard of and a funny little beat for this guy. But yeah, and then it's that thing of just like every time she needs a cab, it's him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to the kind of Franco thing, it is interesting how far the country came, because again the culture was hermetically sealed. Like they wanted to keep Spaniards Spanish. They didn't want any outside influence, to the point where like Franco and his government would say, like, we can't have horror films in Spain. Like, that's detriment to the culture. Like, there's no... And so when you get somebody like Jesus Franco, who ended up making, like, a lot of lesbian vampire movies in France and outside... Like, even he made a Spanish horror movie. I think it was, like, the Rue Morgue, the Living Dead at the Manchester Rue Morgue. And the only reason that, like, Franco allowed it was because it didn't really have Spanish characters. It just had British characters that were bumbling around. And Franco's government was like, well, they're kind of making fun of the Brits, so, like, we'll allow it. Because, like, at least they're not making fun of Spaniards.
Yeah.
But going to the, like, cab driver, you see that melding of genres. Like, even down to the musical taste. You see so many influences that are coming to converge. And sometimes in any Almodóvar films, you'll see that merging of genres, whether it's like melodrama, comedy, or even horror elements that sometimes come to the foray. And the specific scene that I'm thinking about with that is Julieta Serrano when she's on the motorcycle, and you just see that like shot of her head as the wind is just whipping. She is
that wig is.
She is an icon.
She's one of my favorite parts of the movie. Okay, so let's break down all of the women in this movie. So we've talked a little bit about Carmen.
Yeah.
Carmen Maura, just kind of
she plays Pepa, the main character of
kind
this
of
movie.
We are following Carmen on this crazy adventure as she meets all of these characters that come into her life, and everything pretty much ends up at the apartment.
Right.
Yeah. Too.
And I mean, if it's possible to break this movie down at all, is that Pepa and Ivan are in a relationship. They are actors. They act together. They're doing voiceover for this movie at the very beginning, and they lose track. She loses track of him. Right?
He ghosts her for a while.
He ghosts her for a minute, and the rest of the movie, she is kind of doing everything she can to track him down. And
he leaves a message on her machine of pack my shit and leave it downstairs for me. I'm leaving you.
But also, he left her that lovely message on the back of a Lola Beltran record where he just, like, he's like, I don't want to see you unhappy, and just, like, circles the one song.
Yeah. And the rest of the movie is just her trying to track him down and all the different people that come in and out of her life and this apartment in trying to track him down. So who are the first people that she runs into? Because I feel like she's on the phone with Candela for a while before she actually comes to the apartment, right?
So
she's leaving messages with...
Yeah, she only answers the phone once and gets annoyed with Candela, but Candela keeps on
leaving her messages.
Yeah. And so I think that her first interaction is with Lucia.
Right.
Because she goes to see her at her apartment, and she first calls her, and Lucia tells her to go to hell.
Right. And she just assumes that my husband has left me for this woman.
Yes, because she has been in a mental institution for a while.
The character of Lucia is fascinating, of how they style her.
Well,
because it's like not a day has gone by in her relationship, and she has not been sitting in this mental institution for 20 years. Like, she has blocked all of it out, and she is still dressing like it is the mid-60s.
And that's the fault of her father, because her mother keeps on trying to say, like, we got to get her updated and, like, get her with the times. And her father's just like, don't be so rude. Just let her do what she's going to do. And she's like, Dad, can you put on my hat for me? Can you put on my wig?
Oh, my gosh. And she does her makeup where her top lashes are drawn on like Twiggy.
Amazing. It's so, and it's just so perfect.
And she wears these like kind of like, I guess, mod, right?
She wears that leopard print with that giant hat,
the cone hat, and then she'll have like big bouffant like that girl Marlo Thomas, like, you know, like flip hair with like a bow in it, and oh my God, she's amazing. And this woman is the mother of Carlos, who is played by
Antonio Banderas, probably the most handsome man in the world at that time.
Yes.
We had to look up clips of Antonio and Pedro in Truth or Dare.
Madonna's Truth or Dare.
Of when Madonna lays her eyes on that one.
Well, she pretty much crashes a party just to go and try and fuck Antonio Banderas, knowing full well that he's married at the time. Greatest scene in documentary history.
Which I know that it came out a few years ago that like Pedro Almodóvar was like, yeah, they told us that there was going to be cameras there, but we weren't really sure what they were doing. Yeah. They just said it's for like some personal home video stuff for Madonna. We had no idea it was going to be for like a theatrical documentary.
Yeah, I think with Madonna especially, it was kind of a fetishistic thing because like Madonna was at the time well-read in cinema. Like, she said that she always wanted a remake Agnes Varda's Cleo from 5 to 7, and Agnes Varda was like, "You are way too immature to be this role." Like, and with Almodóvar, I think she had a quip in some interview where she was like, "I want to be like one of those girls in an Almodóvar film," and it's like, I think that she was well read. I don't think that she necessarily knew the culture as well.
Right.
And so it's just kind of like Spanish Lothario, I need that in my life, but not really giving time and context to what the Spanish culture actually is.
Yeah, because what year is Truth or Dare? 90?
90, yeah.
So, I mean, for her to even kind of be that aware, I mean, it kind of says something about...
You can tell that Antonio doesn't speak any English.
Very little.
He's so beautiful. And like even him stuttering and just like going in and out of just being this shy guy and then just like making out with Candela the entire time.
Yeah. I don't know what it is about Antonio. Is those lips? It's that mouth. He just has that little Cupid's bow.
Yeah, I think so. For me, it's the hair.
Oh, all right.
The floppy hair is so cute. And Carmen is, and Peppa is going to be subletting or selling her apartment. And unbeknownst to her,
Carlos comes to see it.
With
Marisa, his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Or his fiance?
His fiance. Yep.
Yeah.
And she is overly jealous. Like, when she's just like, "Who was that woman you were talking with?" And he's just like, "That's my mom."
I love how unimpressed she is when she walks into this apartment. Of that, this is very high.
Yeah,
he's like,
it's a penthouse.
It's a penthouse. Yeah, but I love just when she walks through this living room, she's not impressed.
And the way that they explain her behavior is so interesting because it's just she's a virgin, so she's uptight. But once she has that dream and just as Pepa says, like, you lose that harsh look that virgins have, where it's just like, oh, you're nice. So like, wow, that's all you needed in your life.
Yeah, a sex dream. It's as simple as that. Do they? I guess Carlos and Marisa, when they don't leave, they don't ever leave the apartment once they get there.
No,
yeah,
they're
for
there
the
entire
duration of the movie
because she's asleep the entire time. Carlos is just there, like tinkering with the phone, and then he calls about the Shiite terrorists.
Oh my god! First of all right, a couple of things with that sentence. First of all, I believe that in 1988 in Spain, your phone was probably still wired to the wall. Like in the U.S., we had jacks that you could just do it yourself.
Yeah.
The phone company did not have to. I Love Lucy style. I got to call a guy to come and move my phone from one room to the other. But that kind of tracks that she fully. Okay. If Peppa loves one thing, it's ripping a damn phone out of a wall and throwing it out a window.
And it's so conveniently placed because she destroys the phone the first time. She asks Carlos if he can fix it. He fixes it. Calls the police, tells them there's a Shiite terrorist, hangs up the phone, then she destroys the phone again, and when the police come by, they're just like, "We got a call," and she's like, "This phone's destroyed." And then the repairman comes and he's like, "Oh yeah, we got a call at like early in the morning saying a phone was destroyed." So it's just like this script is just so well written. It's just a well-oiled machine.
That terrorist subplot is wild.
Okay. So there is a friend that is leaving a message, Candela, right? And she's younger than Peppa, right? She's a young girl. She's leaving these messages, and her story is... Interesting.
She hooked up with this mysterious man who ends up being a terrorist.
And this is real. What she's saying is this is happening. It's not,
Yes.
She's not overheard something and like jumping to conclusions. This Shiite terrorist situation in this movie,
They will be hijacking
is
a plane.
happening, right? Okay, she's not just like jumping to conclusions.
No,
She fucked this terrorist.
And apparently she got a good dicking down from that guy, because she was like, it was like the first time I made love. She was in love with that man, and then she realized his terrorist origins and was like, I'm an accomplice. I need to either commit suicide or like get out of here.
Because that's my question. Is her whole thing is just like when the cops do arrive later on, she's just like, oh well, she's ready to go on the run with Beppa and just be like fugitives the rest of their lives at some point in the movie.
Yeah.
But I'm like, why does she feel like she's in so much trouble?
So her explanation is that because they captured them, she thinks they're going to have such an intense interrogation that they're going to say, well,
just
where
name
were
her.
you? Yeah.
Okay.
They're going to say, where were you? And they're going to say, oh, I was with this Spanish lady named Candela. And she thinks that the police are going to come after her as a result because she's an accomplice. And then she even tells Peppa, like, well, now that I'm here, you're an accomplice as well.
Right,
and Peppa's just like, in my house, nobody's an accomplice to anything.
Yeah. We're just going to go out of town for a week or so and just wait for this all to blow over. It'll be fine.
Right.
But then we get the next plot line, which includes Paulina Morales, the feminist lawyer.
Oh, the lawyer.
I love the character of the lawyer. That scene where she slaps her, too, is so good.
And when she walks out after it, and the secretary's just like, "Oh, did you get everything you need? Are you good?"
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, I feel so much better now."
Who's the feminist lawyer that's like a celebrity here?
Oh, Gloria Allred.
Oh,
Gloria
yeah.
Allred. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's what this character's kind of giving me.
Okay, she's giving a little Gloria Allred. Okay, but before all this, we do have to rewind a little bit because we have been talking about gazpacho. Beppa decides to whip up a batch of gazpacho in her blender, and she spikes it with a bunch of sleeping pills.
Yeah.
Right? But then
Money.
what happens? They arrive, right?
They
Yeah.
arrive. Well,
Why does she put it away and not just drink it?
I forget why she put it away. But then Candela arrives, and she needs to go do something, and then the two of them come by. So Carlos and Marisa come by, and then she's showing them and talking to him and catching up about Ivan and all that stuff. And while they're talking, that's when Candela tries to commit suicide. And so they all get distracted by that.
Yeah.
And Marisa goes to the kitchen to look for something. She sees the gazpacho.
And she's just like, ooh.
She's like, oh, delicious.
Refreshing. And immediately just passes out.
Out like a light.
And Carlos sees a picture of his dad.
Yes.
Too, and that's when they
That's how they figure it out.
That's how they put two and two together.
He's like, why do you have a picture of my dad here?
Well, that's how Peppa initially realizes that that's his son, because when she goes to see Lucia's apartment and he's leaving, Lucia gets so mad that she throws his stuff out the window and it falls onto the phone booth. She goes outside and she sees the picture that says, like, oh, to Carlos, my son, who I don't deserve.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
This
so
plot is
so many
so
threads.
intricate. It's so intricately woven.
Yeah, because that's the thing. It feels like it's all over the place when you're watching it. You're just like, what is going on? And like, what next? But yeah, it's so like tightly written that it's like
everything makes sense.
Yeah,
and
everything's
everything
for a
has
purpose.
a place.
Yeah. Oh my god, and it has to be timed out this way, and it just feels like this farce or this like comedy of errors, but it's just really
and also very
so much
like
more.
the old screwball comedies of the 40s and 50s too.
Yeah.
That you can tell that he was a big fan of when he was developing the script.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like a 90-minute movie.
Yeah, it's under 90 minutes. It's 89 minutes.
See, that is
they cram a lot in.
That is my G-spot with movies. If you give me a good movie in 90 minutes, I am forever yours.
Yeah.
Like,
Not a second is wasted in this movie.
And it doesn't feel not that it feels long, but it doesn't feel short. It doesn't feel like, oh, that flew like, I don't know. It feels like it's just as long as it needs to be.
It's not quite. I was watching a little bit of All About My Mother today, and the pacing of that movie, while it's really good, that is a story that takes its damn time.
Oh, that I would say is my favorite of his movies, All About My Mother. But again, I would say that Women on the Verge is a technical masterpiece just because of the way that it's structured and it's so perfectly written. It's kind of like, this is a weird comparison to make, but like when you watch Silence of the Lambs and you're watching that movie and you're just like, nothing is wasted in this movie.
Right.
Like everything serves a purpose. Everything's going along. Like this is just like a near perfect movie. With Women on the Verge, it's just like those canted angles, those high angles, those low angles, that tracking count. Everything is just frenetic enough that it keeps you clipping along and never really gives you a dull moment to just be like, well, what are we doing here?
Sure.
Like, you have some action that's going on or some subplot that's going on, but it all meets up in the end at that airport.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. We mentioned that the police do eventually arrive to the apartment. I love though that when she breaks the phone several times and she's just like, try and fix this phone, and he's like, okay, how do you fix the phone?
Yeah.
All right.
I think you got to go get a new phone.
At that, or you call the guy and the guy comes.
Yeah.
But once Marissa kind of gets knocked out, Carlos starts kind of getting a little bit more comfortable with Candela.
He's becoming his father's son.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And, it's one of those things, and they said, Madonna said it in Truth or Dare. She's talking to one of the backup dancers after the party, and she's just like, oh, he's married. But, someone told me that it doesn't matter in Spain. It's like, oh, well.
And the way that they explain, again, this movie is just so well written, but the way that they explain it at the end when she finally wakes up and sees the two of them asleep in each other's arms, and then Peppa's just like, oh, don't worry about that, we'll deal with it tomorrow. Like, that's not important.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay, we talked about the taxi driver a little bit, coming in and out. The taxista.
There's also Chus Lamprey. Oh my god, I mispronounced her name. Chus. I'm just gonna say Chus. The woman downstairs who's the Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, the neighbor.
Oh, sure.
Sure.
She can't tell a lie.
No,
it's a religion.
Every time she appears in his movies, and she passed away, so obviously she's not going to be appearing in these latest ones, but she just lights up the screen because she is definitely a character actress.
Yeah.
Like, she knows the role that she's playing, and it's usually the ditzy one. So, like, if you watch What Have I Done to Deserve This, she plays the grandma that has a lizard, or Dark Habits, she's one of the nuns. Like, and I think in Volver, she's the ditzy aunt or grandma who's just like has Alzheimer's and just doesn't know who the hell some of these people are. So like, she knows the role that she's playing and she has fun with it. She's that Jehovah's Witness who found a shoe.
So interesting, just one, and Peppa's just like, just shut up, just give me the goddamn shoe. It's mine. It came from my apartment. Don't worry about it. The big her creeper. It was a blue suede.
Oh yeah,
creeper, the pointy kind with a buckle.
That's such beautiful fashion.
When she throws that record out of her off her balcony and hits
Gloria Allred in the back of the head,
hits Paulina in the head, I thought she was gonna kill her.
I love the way that scene plays out because it's just like comedic timing, and then when she's so heated and so mad about it and she's like, what did you ever see in this woman? She just wants to, like, I don't understand it, and then you get the answering machine right on the car.
That's right, the entire answering machine at this point now gets
and she's just like, this woman has a vendetta against me, we need to get to Stockholm immediately.
Oh my god, Jesus. Yeah, okay, so they're trying to go to Stockholm. They're going to Sweden just to get away, get out of the country. And the Shiite terrorists are going to hijack a plane to Stockholm.
Yep.
Oh, it's their plane that they're
their
taking.
plane.
So it's
Yes.
really like it's really a
This
Yeah.
script.
This script.
slaps. Each thread meets up at that
But that
airport.
gets wrapped up really quickly, though, because the cops are just like, when they come to the house, Candela's like, okay, listen, I have this information. We have to do something with it, but, like, we can't call the cops. And Carlos, Antonio's like, we'll make a fast phone call. But the character stutters.
Yeah.
She's like, you're going to make a fast phone call. And he's like, yeah, it's a fast phone call.
It's a fast phone call.
But they trace it. And they're like, how did you know? Everybody knows now, but you knew before it was on the news. So the thing is, it's on the news. Everybody knows about it. And they're like, there's more cops than people at the airport. There's more cops than travelers at the airport right now. So don't worry about the terrorists. It's taken care of. So it's like, on one hand, it's like they know about it and they've already kind of thwarted it.
I think that in this particular instance, all of these loose threads that come to happen at the end, Almodóvar just kind of wraps it up in that line where it's like, don't worry about it, we'll deal with it tomorrow. Because there are still lingering things that are going to happen the next day. Like when she's talking to Yvonne and he's like, why did you come here? And she said, you were in danger. I wanted to save you. She's not talking about the Shiite terrorists. She's just talking about Lucia trying to kill him. And so now that he's out of that danger, she doesn't have to care about the Shiite terrorists that are going to take over the plane and reroute them to Berlin.
Oh my gosh. And Lucia has come to the apartment now to kill Pepa?
I think, she's going to kill. Okay, so this is one of those images that I had not seen this movie, but I had seen images of this actress, like styled like this. Like this is just like an
Didn't
image.
they do it in Drag Race Spain?
I think that they did it on Drag Race Spain. They did it on the runway.
I think two of them did it.
But there's images of this in like cinema textbooks. So even if you haven't seen the movie, you've seen this image. So it was just kind of fun to finally see context with it.
And in the way that he stylized the phone conversations that they had was also interesting, because whereas like with Yvonne and Pepa, they're having a conversation, but they just keep on missing the other side of it. Like he's talking on the answering machine and she's responding back to it. Or like he calls on the phone and she's barely able to get it, or the Johnny Guitar thing. With her and Lucia, they're framed in kind of shot reverse shot. So like they'll be shown side profile and Pepa is facing one way and Lucia is facing the other way. Or when they have that next conversation, they're both front facing as though they're talking to each other. And it's just like Wes Anderson wishes. Like it's so beautifully constructed. And yeah, the colors, the everything about it, even her with those weird ass braids that she has that are going to be covered by that wig.
I mean, okay, and then the cops are there and they've got questions about the terrorism and all of that. So I love that she's just like, I've got an idea. Who wants gazpacho?
Who wants gazpacho?
Let's knock everybody out. But when the two of them are standing there with their cups of gazpacho, just having this showdown, I'm just like, all right, what's going to happen? And she throws that shit in her face. I'm just like, all right, how spicy is this gazpacho?
It apparently blinded her.
She had to run to the eye wash station. She is like...
No, and the build up to that, because that score is just swelling as they're both going for this gazpacho.
Is this Alberto Iglesias?
No.
The score is wild.
I think it's Bernardo. I forget the last name, but I believe it was an Italian.
Sure, I think Alberto Iglesias did everything after All About My Mother.
Yeah, he started to come towards the later part of his career, and he stuck with him, which I think is a good choice, because I do love some of those scores. But with this one, like, the score is so overly melodramatic.
A lot of bassoons.
Yeah. Could that bassoon have been more late?
Woodwinds.
It's Bernardo Bonetti.
Yeah.
Is the composer for the score. It's very frenetic, though, towards it, like from there out, it is just like constant. It's a cacophony.
It adds to that melodrama.
It gives me it always gives me Hitchcock.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I see elements like this in his movies.
Well, it is kind of a thriller score in portions because, like, when they're leading up to her doing her Johnny guitar, or when she's doing the dubbing, they're showing the projector and they just have this, like, overly anxiety-inducing score that's going on as the, like, film's going through the reel. Yeah. Or, like, again, with the gazpacho show-off, like, they have that lead up to them drinking, and then when she throws it in the face, the score just disappears.
Sure, yeah. Mis ojos.
Lucia getting the ride to the airport is pretty iconic. Her on the back of that bike, I love it.
I think he said that I'm sure that listeners can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he was inspired by the Wicked Witch of the West.
Oh, I can see that. Well, especially like how she's photographed when she's on the escalator at the airport too. That's such a cool image.
Again, just
the moving walkway.
Yeah. Just his level of pastiche is not gratuitous. It's all intentional.
Yeah. Right.
Due to the character's context or the plot context, and so like her being coded as the Wicked Witch of the West,
Mrs. Gulch making her getaway to the airport.
Sure.
Yeah.
And just having that blown out hair when
my God, when they get there, the wig is insane, and I love it. Okay, so there are scenes that are out of the apartment, but so much of it does take place in the apartment that as I'm watching it, I'm thinking this feels like it could easily be translated into a stage production, which it has been, which I found out later on. To varying degrees of success.
I think that the Broadway run was in 2010, and the reception was kind of mixed.
Okay.
One of our friends and guests of the show, Paul, from That Age Well, said it was just all right. Said there was some good songs in it, but he said it didn't really work overall for him.
Right.
Yeah, I think with the cultural specificity.
Yeah, I was going to say, just translating it into English and being like, it's America now.
It's kind of like when Michael Haneke did Funny Games, the original version,
Do you want to hear?
He remade it shot for.
Do you want to hear something embarrassing?
What?
I've only seen the American remake. I've only seen the American remake of Funny Games and Solaris. Partly because the remake of Solaris is just a lot shorter.
I've only seen the American remake of that Baby Vampire movie.
Baby Vampire movie? Oh, Let the Right One In?
Yeah.
Oh, Baby Vampire.
Oh, we never.
I was like,
we never
what?
watched. We never watched the.
I didn't watch it with you.
We never watched the Swedish Let the Right One In together.
No.
Oh, shocking.
But there is an element that's lost when you lose that cultural context.
I would think so.
Absolutely.
I would think so with this
Like,
material.
I think it would only have to work in Spain.
Yeah,
with
or
Spanish actors,
you need to rework it entirely to make it something that can stand on its own. This movie is way too Spanish to like take it out of a Spanish context, and I can't speak specifically to that production because I never watched it. Right. I didn't really listen to the music. I just know
Patti
that Patti
LuPone did a
was
song
in it.
for it. So interesting.
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel like it could get sitcom-y.
Sure. I love that. I mean, studios in America love to take a foreign movie. Abra los Ojos is one. Of Cameron Crowe watched that movie and was just like, I'm going to remake that in English. I like that you cannot really do that with any of his movies. Like, it wouldn't work.
No, and the smart thing that he did early on in his career was establish his own production company.
Yeah.
Because what a lot of people don't understand about like trying to break through in the international market and especially in the US market is that if you move over completely, you lose a lot of the autonomy that you had in your home country.
Sure.
So like with him establishing his production company and having this early on success, he got a lot more freedom to do the films that he wanted. And Hollywood was trying to get him. I believe that he said that he was offered the director position for First Wives Club, but turned it down.
Oh
my God. We just did First Wives Club on the podcast. That is so interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been a very different movie.
Extremely.
I don't know if it would have worked, but I kind of want to watch that movie.
Yeah.
Especially if those three are going to be in it.
But the thing is that if you have him doing an American production for an American studio, they're going to have demands on what he can do and what he cannot do. Whereas when he's in Spain, he has free reign to do the scripts that he wants to do and how he wants to do it and with the people that he wants to do it.
And, I mean, he's really only made 2 shorts in English. Yeah. One was The Human Voice with Tilda. Yeah. And the other one, I mean, I guess it's going to be out sometime this fall.
Yes.
With Pedro Pascal and Ethan Hawke, the gay cowboy movie. And those are like 30 minutes. They're not even features, too.
Yeah, but they're still made under his production company rather than a specific studio. And I believe that they're released through Sony Pictures Classics, which he still has that relationship with them. And so it still kind of gives him that level of autonomy.
But I like that if he's going to be doing something in English, it's just going to be a short mama. He's not doing a feature.
No. Sometimes, I mean, not that I don't think he's capable of doing a feature-length film in English. I think it's just a very ambitious project. And so I think that right now he's testing the waters with what he wants to do, and especially with collaborators who do have that kind of international recognition. Because it seems like Tilda Swinton and Cate Blanchett are the people that you want if you're an international director.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And so Tilda Swinton especially, just because she's such an alien of an actress that, like, she can morph into whatever you want her to be. Even if it's just, like, she's going to wear these lovely gowns as she's, like, trying to burn down her apartment.
I still have not seen it, and it's hard to get a hold of. I tried to watch it today, but I don't know.
Yeah, I saw it when it came out. I have my own opinions about it. I don't think it's entirely successful because obviously the play that it's based on is a one-person play in their apartment as they're talking on a phone with their ex-lover, and they're trying to, like, finally end this relationship that they know is already dying. And so Tilda just kind of being on a phone the entire time.
Right.
On, if I remember correctly, like a phone and a Bluetooth simultaneously, and also dealing with the dog. It was okay. It was an okay movie. I think that, like, as an Almodóvar completist, it's definitely something that you want to see for the ambition of the project. I wouldn't say that it's wholly successful on its own.
What's the cowboy short called?
I forget the name.
And that's going to Venice, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
But no, I saw a movie this week, and right before the movie, they had a trailer for it. So I guess it's going to be theatrically distributed.
Oh. Interesting. It's called Strange Way of Life.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Extraña Forma de Vida. Original title. There you go. Doesn't say how long it is here. Oh, wait, yeah. 31 minutes. I'll take it.
Again, give me a short movie.
Right?
But theatrically, that's interesting. I mean, that doesn't happen often, ever.
And I think that you have to be a director with the gravitas of Pedro to really do something like that.
It's so interesting that the Hollywood studios are just like, yes, we like you, we like your work, we would like to work with you. Do this thing that you would never in a million years do on your own. What First Wives Club.
And I mean
Harry Potter.
And that happens a lot. Yep.
You know what I mean? Like,
and sometimes international directors just kind of get alive with projects like that. Yeah. I mean, like View from the Top, that was like a Brazilian director that I think had done like an indie movie in South America.
And we all saw what stellar career that turned out to be.
Yeah, I mean, even somebody like Ingmar Bergman, the only English movie that he did was notoriously a flop. And, like, that movie had Elliot Gould in it.
The
Touch.
My Blueberry Nights.
Oh. Well, he also... Wait, didn't he also do Stoker? No, I might be...
No, that's... Isn't that Bung... I'm confusing, like, my Asian... the Asian cinema
Stoker
now.
with Nick? With Nicole?
Look up who... Wong Kar-wai directed My Blueberry Nights. I don't think Wong Kar-wai did Stoker.
Who directed Stoker?
I think he was Korean.
Park Chan-wook.
There we go.
Old Boy.
Yes.
Yep.
Old boy, wow.
Which that movie, Stoker, that's another movie. Nicole Kidman's outburst when she yells at her child.
I drug Pete to that movie.
I did see that
for
in the
a press
theater.
screening at the Sony lot.
I did see that in the theater.
I've seen a few movies in the Sony Pictures Classics, like screening rooms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, going on a tangent about that movie, Nicole Kidman was the main reason to watch that movie.
Yeah.
And when
Absolutely.
Again, when she tells her daughter, I can't wait to watch life tear you apart. I'm probably misquoting it, but just like, Nicole Kidman is the embodiment of camp. Like, she does not know how campy she is, and we have to keep her from not knowing.
From finding out.
Yeah, because that's the way that you preserve it. It's kind of like, what was it, the Undoing, the HBO show that she did? Like,
sure,
I never watched it. I know that it just had fabulous wigs.
Oh my god, there's a scene where somebody's murdered, and the police are following her and her family, and they take Nicole Kidman in for questioning, and they're just like, well, we have footage of you going on a walk. And she's like, what? And they show her a security cam still of her walking in the middle of the street as her green robe is like flowing in the air. I watched that and I was just like, who chose that shot? Because it's just so brilliant. Like, Nicole Kidman does not understand the level of power she has.
Yeah, yeah. I think if they ever drag her in to do like a sequel to the AMC, like
the
little promo,
yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen. Like,
well, allegedly they are making a sequel to it. I just don't know.
I know that was in the contract when they originally did it. I mean, I don't know if maybe they're just adjusting it of it's perfect, just keep all your money. I don't know.
But like, is she just going to be like, okay, sure, the kids like it, let's do another?
She does not need to know how campy she is, because we need to keep this woman pure.
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
we need to keep her devoid of knowing. Like, I feel like she would be a perfect muse, bringing it back to Almodóvar, if he were to ever use her, because she doesn't know the power that she possesses.
Sure.
And he could use her to her full potential.
Sure. Just a clap of those those long fingers.
Oh God, that gif of her clapping is beautiful.
It was the jewelry.
It was the jewelry.
It was the jewelry.
I know.
Yeah, I don't know what an American Pedro Almodóvar movie would be like. I think you would just have to make a melodrama. You would just have to make, I want like a murder mystery with Kate and Nicole and Penelope where they're all locked in a mansion, maybe. I don't know.
I could see that. I think that it would inevitably be watered down of any kind of bite that it has, because like watching something like The Skin I Live In, where he just goes for it. Like he shows you
That's
the
another
brutality.
movie. That's another movie I've yet to watch.
Scott.
I know.
It's fascinating because I watched it in a transitional phase in my life where like I was just graduating from my undergrad and going on to grad school, and like it just hit me at the right time because that was also the same year as Drive and as Weekend. And that like combination of those three films just like hit that sweet spot. And especially with The Skin I Live In, because if you've watched Eyes Without a Face, there's a lot of that being referenced in just the styling of the lead actress in that film. And Antonio Banderas as this like mad scientist surgeon who... I'm not going to necessarily spoil it for you, because if you go into it not knowing, you're going for a hell of a ride. But if you watch it, it takes you to the depths of what revenge looks like for these specific characters, and specifically for one character that is just completely oblivious to the effects that he has on everybody around him, and how the things that he does lead to his own undoing, but also lead to the guy who's serving out his vengeance's own undoing as well. So
yeah, I need to watch it.
What is the movie where they live in the cave?
Oh,
is that Pain and Glory?
Pain and Glory. I
So-
really like Pain and Glory.
What do we think of Antonio Banderas in kind of more contemporary Almodóvar movies, having reached a certain age, is now just playing Pedro? Like,
Yeah.
Sure. Well, especially in that movie.
yeah, yeah.
I think that with any kind of director, you get your phases of them.
Right.
So, like with Almodóvar, his initial phase was just La Movida.
Yeah.
It was just kind of this insane, zany madcap. Then it became more refined to the like Almodóvar style. Then it became more refined to more serious content in terms of the characters that he was tackling and especially the plot lines that he was tackling. And I think that now that he's getting towards the twilight of his life, he's getting more reflective. So when you get something like I'm So Excited, it's not a zany madcap comedy. It's a like hearkening back to an older version of a film that he might have made in the 80s. So it's like a looking back. Or with Julieta, where it's about a woman just kind of reflecting on her life. Or Pain and Glory, just him.
And Parallel Mothers ends up sort of taking a turn in the last act of that movie where it's reflecting on like the history of Spain.
Yeah.
Too, which is really interesting.
And I was watching that with a friend, and he didn't necessarily understand what was going on. And my knowledge of Spanish history is a lot of cinematic. And so when I was watching that and just watching about these mass graves and knowing about Franco and the things that happened, it's interesting how he takes that thread of them looking for the lost ancestors and ties it in with this woman who had a child that wasn't hers.
Yeah.
And lost a child that was hers that she never knew. And kind of how that like develops in, and I would say that there are some faults in terms of the plot line, but overall it's just kind of interesting how it's interesting how certain directors deal with their own history and with their own cultural history. Because especially when you're living under a dictatorship, you go to a finer point to metaphor to kind of deal with the trauma that you're living with. So like one of my favorite Spanish directors, Carlos Saura, a lot of the films that he made while Franco was alive were very metaphorical. So like the typical one that I love is Cría Cuervos, which is about a little girl whose father was a soldier for Franco. Her mother was a pianist. She thinks that she killed her father by giving him a poison, and she's happy about it because she blames him for killing her mother. Okay. And so everything is a stand-in for Franco and for Spain and kind of this hermetically sealed culture that he's trying to create and not allowing these people to kind of live their lives. And you get images of some of that in some of his films, but not as much. It pops up here and there. So like in Matador, I believe that they were doing a fashion runway show called like The Two Spains, where you kind of showing this bloody side of Spain and then this more like contemporary refined side. I think that as he goes along with his filmography, you get a lot more serious with kind of the effects of that culture. So like All About My Mother, you see the division between the like free-spirited Barcelona versus the like more conservative and refined Madrid, and how like she transitions from one world where she lived this bohemian lifestyle with her spouse, who was a transgender sex worker, and their friend who is also a transgender sex worker who gives great monologues. And this refined life where she just became a nurse and just raised her son and now has to transport herself back to that life in order to find the parent of this child that didn't even know they had a child. So, like, he knows how to deal with that delicate balance. I think more now he's kind of, again, getting more reflective on his own mortality and inserting that in there. But he still has an element of fun. It's just, I think that from Volver on, it hasn't been the same kind of zany comedy that you would get with, like, Women on the Verge.
And maybe we're going to get a little bit of that with this new short. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, maybe. I really like Parallel Mothers. I mean, I hate to be the basic bitch and say what my favorite Pedro Almodóvar movie because I haven't seen all of them, so I really can't give like a firm answer. But I think of everything that I have watched post All About My Mother, I think Parallel Mothers is my favorite. I think Penelope Cruz is really good in it.
Penelope's performance.
I think that
is so
it's like
good.
it's the best work that she's ever done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that she's in her best element when she's in that Spanish mode, because
Yeah.
a lot of her more memorable roles are with Spanish directors rather than with, like
right.
other directors. But I mean, she made Voltaire, she made Parallel Mothers. She's done a lot of work with Almodóvar, and I think that he takes such care with his actors that they're able to deliver these kind of performances.
I mean, I know that we don't really like to talk about Woody Allen, but I was watching something on TikTok that was talking about screen time for supporting actress. Penelope Cruz is only in like 17 minutes of Vicky Cristina Barcelona. And like she utilizes every single second she's on screen in that movie.
Yeah. And even during her acceptance speech when she won the Oscar, she thanked Pedro
Yeah.
Almodóvar because they're such good friends. And it's nice to see that partnership with certain directors where it's just like, if they call you on a whim, or it's just like, hey, I need you for a movie, you just kind of show up.
She's like, I'm there. I'm on the next plane.
Yeah. Which I was kind of sad about the relationship with Carmen Maura fizzling out after Women on the Verge. And allegedly they had a falling out. I don't think it was necessarily ever confirmed, but she didn't come back to his films until Voltaire.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, again, getting back into this reflective mode. It's about a woman reconciling with her past and potentially seeing a ghost of her mother, played by Carmen Maura.
And she had been with him since kind of the beginning.
Yeah, I think the only movie that she wasn't in up until that time was Labyrinth of Passion, which, if you have not seen that movie, love that movie from his early stuff.
Wow,
that
1982.
Yeah, that and Law of Desire, but Labyrinth of Passion, the main character is a punk rock star named Sexcelia, who is a nymphomaniac who falls in love with a gay Middle Eastern prince who, up until that time, he was gay, but because he saw how beautiful he was, he renounced his gay ways and lived a heterosexual lifestyle.
And what was the cause of the fallout? Has she kind of gone on interviews and talked about any of that?
I think with Voltaire, it became more of a public question that was being asked because she had to do all these press junkets. To my understanding, I think she was saying there wasn't any fallout. It was just kind of creatively they were going in different directions. So they both moved on with their career.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't know what happened, so I can't give any veracity to whether or not there was a fallout. But you kind of see indications of, like, as my professor would say, like, what if Carmen Maura was in All About My Mother? What if she was in Flower of My Secret? Or what if
you could very easily see her being the lead of All About My Mother?
Yeah,
too.
Because she's very charismatic and she's used extremely well in his movies, and they had such a great relationship. You kind of wonder what if, and I think Voltaire kind of brings back that to fruition when you cast her as a ghost, and it's just like she's casting a shadow on the rest of his filmography. Yeah. Not to say those films aren't great, because Celia Roth and Marisa Paredes are both great actresses, but you kind of see something about Carmen Maura as the lead of some of these films.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm just sitting here going, okay.
Pete, what's your favorite Almodóvar movie?
And the one with the talking baby in it. No dinosaurs in these movies. Okay, so I feel like my favorite. I do really love. I do really love Penelope's performance in Parallel Mothers. I thought it was very moving.
We saw that movie on my birthday.
We did.
Yep.
We did. But yeah, I haven't seen that many, so I think that's hard for me to.
I was counting today on Letterboxd, and I have seen 8.
Okay.
Which I guess isn't bad.
No, that's good. But yeah, I feel like I don't know. We gotta get a box set, and we'll just go right through them. Everything we haven't seen. But I'm excited for Strange Way of Life, And yeah, I mean,
We have the flight attendant movie sitting on our table right now. We just rented it. We have a DVD of it.
The flight attendant.
The flight attendant. I'm so excited.
I'm so
I'm so excited. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be watching it.
And I know
this weekend.
from everything I've read about that movie, I mean, it was always kind of meant to be silly.
Yeah.
Like it was Pedro having fun.
It was hearkening back to his old days of just like having a sex comedy. And watching that movie, there's not really any rhyme or reason to it. It has a nice cameo from Penelope and Antonio in the beginning. But yeah. And there's a musical scene where the flight attendants sing "I'm So Excited," which
I remember that from the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
It's an okay movie. I'd say it's more, for me personally, it's more mid to lower end. I'd kind of lump it in with like Kika, where it's just like, it's an ambitious film, but it's not as successful as some of the other movies.
And you mentioned All About My Mother is probably your favorite, then?
Yes.
Yeah.
I also have a tattoo of that on me.
I love that.
That movie, not only because it was my first, but I have a weakness for certain genres of films. So if you give me a high school coming of age movie that takes place in a high school or a camp, I'm all about that movie. If you give me a movie about a mother that's suffering, all about that movie. Like, I will be crying. And this, All About My Mother, I think, is amazing because it kind of revolves around the films that I started watching around the time that I started watching that movie. So, like, at the end, he has a scroll where it says to Betty Davis, to Jenna Rollins, to Romy Schneider. And so I was watching those movies as I was getting more prepared for school and just kind of falling in love with these actresses and the depths that he was showing them. And so watching something like Opening Night, where the beginning of it is this crazed fan who's trying to run after Jenna Rollins and then she gets hit by a taxi. You see that reflected in All About My Mother when the son, Esteban, gets hit by the taxi. And that just threw me for a loop. And the characters are just so beautifully done. And especially El Agrado, which I quoted for my last graduation when I was getting my master's. I gave the commencement speech, and I actually quoted All About My Mother for that one, because at the end, she's just saying, like, to be authentic is pretty expensive, and it's not a time to be stingy with that, because if I remember, you are more authentic the more you resemble that which you dreamed of being. And it's just like, that's a perfect line. That's a great line to go out on. But, like, it's also, I believe it's one of the first instances where he talks about AIDS in a movie.
Sure.
Because he generally stays away from the heavier topics up until this point, but that one...
And he gives the character dying of AIDS as a nun, too, which is very interesting.
Yep, a heterosexual.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, he went into darker territory with that, and then he would go even further with Talk to Her, which, I think that was his best period or his, like, apex of his movies. But that doesn't mean, like, he went on a downward decline. It's just, like, I don't necessarily know that he could reach that height again.
Sure.
But Skin I Live In was great. Julieta was great. If you watch Julieta, there is an amazing transition that is just so seamless, where there are two actresses playing Julieta, young Julieta and older Julieta. The way they transition to her is young Julieta is getting her hair dried, and they're, like, rubbing her head with a towel, and then they take the towel off, and it's older Julieta.
Oh, okay.
It's just so perfect. But I'm curious where he's going to go with the films that he's making, because he seems to be in a more, like I said, melancholic and reflective tone. He might still infuse it with comedy, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Wow. You guys. Shit. Some deep shit here. I feel like there's like almost body horror elements in some movies. There's just like I don't know what directors just kind of have like all of these different themes going on in their body of work.
Yeah.
You know, and just the amount of
the
amount of work that he puts out.
I have a list of themes that I have in my notes. I'm seeing sexuality and gender, family. Kind of a lot of his movies focus on the complexities of family and the trauma that you carry through your adult life. Memory and trauma, art and performance. I mean, he often kind of puts in artists, actors, and musicians in a lot of these movies too. Death and mortality, especially within the past decade of his movies too. So just kind of themes that I have in my notes. Do you have any other ones that I just didn't mention?
Nothing I can really... I mean, again, going back to his obsession, he does have his obsessions, but with the musicality, that was one that always fascinated me when I started getting into him, because for his earlier films, up until a certain point, he would revolve them around a specific song. So, with this... So, with Talk to Her, it was Cucuru Cucu Paloma. With All About My Mother, it was Tayabon.
Volver is a big one.
Yeah.
What's the song that she
sings? Volver.
Volver, yeah.
With Women on the Verge, it's Lola Beltran, Soy Infeliz, which plays in the opening credits. It plays frequently throughout. It plays when she's thrown the record.
Oh my God, the opening credits of this movie. I want to walk through an art exhibit and just see plates of those. They're gorgeous.
It's beautiful. And to think about, in 1988, somebody had to sit there and cut out each of those magazines and, form them. The one that I always think of is the woman that's doing her lipstick, and somebody had to cut out her lips and put it on a separate, flat bread thing. And it's just so gorgeous the way that they did it. And I think at one point it's just even a flower of lips.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's his production design, his titles, he had a signature style that he was going towards, and he achieved it for many years onward. I think once he got into the digital era, it wasn't as much.
Right.
I can't really remember the titles of Parallel Mothers as well. Skin I Live In was there's more artistry in what's going on in the production design. But yeah, I can't really think of memorable titles since maybe Bad Education.
Okay. Yeah. Fair.
I remember watching Bad Education when I was 18 years old and just thinking I'm watching an NC-17 movie. And then you get to the story of it and just being oh, this is what this movie is about.
Oh my God.
There are layers to that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting at home going, he's giving Julia Roberts, honey.
Gael is very pretty.
And Pedro kept on saying that along the junkets, where he was I hired him because he has a Julia Roberts mouth.
He absolutely does. Does he play... Is his character Mexican in that? He's not.
No.
His character's Spanish, yeah.
Yeah, I think the character's Spanish. Yeah, it's...
You can do the accent.
Yeah. No, I think because I'm remembering that year when he won the Oscar, I think he was sitting near Diego Luna and Gael Garcia Bernal. And
because they would have been there because that was when Itamo Tambien was in screenplay.
Yeah.
Sure.
I've seen that clip way too many times, and the main thing that I take away from it is Mira Sorvino standing up and giving him a hug. It just looks very awkward. I love Mira Sorvino, but it just seems
and you are.
She's the only one that just gets up and gives him a hug for some reason.
That's funny. I love that.
Yeah, Gael Garcia Bernal was good in that movie. That's definitely a heavy movie, and I think it. Going back to college discussions of it, my professor was always I think that Bad Education is the closest we get to a discussion about his childhood, because it seems there's some trauma going on with his relationship to the church, and especially with the clergy, because you see it pop up time and time again where if you look at Law of Desire, the transgender sister talks about how she had a relationship with a priest and then ended up transitioning into a woman when she went to Morocco with her father, who was also her lover. That happens a lot, where the child ends up sleeping with the father and then they go to Morocco for some reason. Yeah. But yeah, I think that something happened in his childhood that caused that trauma, and he just kind of unfolds it slowly, but doesn't really give the whole picture of what happened.
Mm-hmm. Wow. All right. Well, I mean, I feel like we could continue this conversation.
We'll be doing more.
longer.
We'll be doing more Pedro Almodóvar episodes too
in the future. But I mean, this has been very enlightening.
I like that we started on
much.
Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
It feels like the appropriate place to start.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Jose. Yeah.
This was great. This was, like I said, very enlightening. For me, your dumb movie watcher.
Oh, give yourself a little more credit, Pete.
Oh, I know. I'm just playing, y'all. But yeah, this was super fun. We would I'd love to have you on again to talk Almodóvar even further, or something else of your choice, man. This was great.
We'll have you on for the Hannah Montana movie.
I have so many questions.
I know that you have thoughts.
I have so many questions about that door that they created that's egg-shaped. An entire city kept her secret. So many questions.
Oh my god! Now the climb was written for that movie. Okay,
yeah,
that's a whole other episode. We'll talk about that another time. But yeah, until then, I think it's time to bid you adieu. Thank you so much once again for coming on the show. We'd love to do this again in the future. But we'll see you next time, listeners.
Bye.
Bye. And thanks for listening, everybody.
I'm glad that we finally got to a Pedro Almodóvar movie on the show.
Absolutely. You two did a wonderful job dissecting these movies. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I did, folks. But, episode is winding down.
Is it that time, Pete?
I think it's that time. I think it's time for our Patreon
shout-outs. Let's hear them.
All right, we'd like to say hello to all of our wonderful patrons, including Brett, Tren, Daisy, Patrick, Kelly, Chrissy, Stephen, Jake, Desiree, Laura, Thomas, Brenna, Jessa Rabbit, Lawrence, Lisa, Alexis, Thomas, Mark, Jackson, Millie, Ted, Benny, Jamel, Melanie, Susan, JJ, Shelby, Jamie, Drew, Genevieve, Dawn, Joshua, Emily, Aaron, Jessica, Nick and Shannon, Christine and Rufino. You guys, thank you so much for being patrons. Head over to patreon.com/movies that made us gay to check out all of our cool supplemental material.
We have commentaries on there, and by the time this episode comes out, we will be talking about TV on the Patreon.
Yes, indeed. Television that keeps us gay. So head over to patreon.com/movies that made us gay for more information on how to support the show. All of your donations go directly to keeping this podcast on the air every week. Listeners, we are here every week ad-free. How much do you love that? Thank you so much. Scott, do we have some new reviews?
We have some new reviews. We have two, actually. We have one entitled Perfect from Juju Face. This is a perfect podcast. Hilarious discussion, fun banter, and excellent movie talks. 5 stars. Thank you so much.
Yay. Thank you, Gigi Face, Apple Podcast listener.
And we have one from Ash Bev, my new favorite, 5 stars. So, Pete, this is from a Drew Barrymore podcast that they've been dropping in our DMs and said some kind words. They gave us a really nice shout out on their 50th episode. I thought that was so cool that they talked about us talking about Drew, and she says that she sometimes gets she sometimes corrects people if they get facts wrong, and we really knew our Drew.
Yes, indeed.
On our episodes that we've done.
The podcast is called How Do You Drew? It is it's a Drew Barrymore appreciation podcast. It's a podcast from the gals behind Drewseum. It is an Instagram page. It's at Drewseum. It's a fan page, and it's just a Drew Barrymore retrospective. And so their podcast is called How Do You Drew? And they're available anywhere you get your podcast, just like us, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And new episodes every Drew's Day. And their host has left us a fine review.
As co-host of the Drew Barrymore-centric podcast, How Do You Drew, I'm always on the lookout for other pods with Drew content. So happy I stumbled onto this gem. I've already burned through all of their incredible Drew episodes, and now I'm excited to jump into the rest. It's so refreshing to listen to hosts who really know their stuff. Pop culture kings. Thank you so much.
Love it.
We might be doing a collaboration with them.
Yeah, sit tight, everybody.
Soon, too.
Go check out our back catalog for tons of Drew content, including episodes on Poison Ivy, Charlie's Angels Full Throttle.
I was re-listening to our Donnie Darko episode with Michael Morgan, and I think that is one of my favorite episodes.
It's a fun
really
episode.
good.
It's a fun movie. Check it out. And while you're doing that, check out the How Do You Drew podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts. We'd also love for you to rate and review our show. If you want to write a review like that, we'll read it on an upcoming episode. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, give us 5 stars.
Yeah.
All right. You can follow us on any of the social media platforms. We are on most of them. We're at Movies That Made Us Gay on Instagram, Threads, Facebook. We are on X still.
And Threads.
But on X, we are MTMUG Pod.
Yes.
Because Movies That Made Us Gay was taken. But yeah, check us out on all those socials and give us a follow. If you want to follow our personals, feel free. I'm Pete. I'm at Peter Lasagna on Instagram and Threads and X as well.
Scott Youngballer on Instagram, and follow my letterbox.
Yes, indeed. Thanks again for listening, everybody. We'll see you same time, same place next week, next Friday. Bye.
Bye.